My name is Clara. I was 28 years old when I walked into the grand foyer of a stunning $5 million estate in Beverly Hills, uninvited. The mansion was filled with 200 high society guests sipping champagne, celebrating my older sister's brand launch and housewarming party. When my father saw me, his face went ghost white. He marched over, grabbed my arm, and hissed, "How dare you show your face here? Security is going to throw you out." I didn't flinch. I calmly pulled a thick federal stamped folder from my designer bag, handed it to him, and said loudly enough for the silent room to hear, "Security works for me now, Dad, because as of 9 a.m. this morning, I don't just own the mortgage to this house, I own the bank that holds it. You have 24 hours to pack your bags." They thought I was just a ghost. 3 years earlier, while I was lying in a hospital bed in a medically induced coma, fighting for my life, my parents and my sister used a forged power of attorney to legally steal my inheritance to buy this very mansion. They left me to wake up homeless, sick, and completely bankrupted. They had absolutely no idea that they had just stolen from a woman who would spend the next 3 years learning how to financially obliterate them. Before I show you exactly how I turned my family's stolen mansion into their federal prison, take a quick second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, drop a comment down below. Where in the world are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? I love reading every single one. To understand how a family can execute the psychological and financial assassination of their own daughter, you have to understand the deeply toxic, image-obsessed hierarchy of the Sterling family. Growing up in our household, my older sister, Chloe, was the sun. I was simply the shadow she cast, useful only to make her shine brighter. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, were mid-level real estate agents who desperately, painfully wanted to be part of the 1%. They didn't have the income for it, but they certainly had the debt. They financed a lifestyle built entirely on maxed-out credit cards and leased luxury cars just to maintain the illusion of elite status at their local country club. Chloe was their golden ticket. She was aggressively charismatic, conventionally beautiful, and possessed a ruthless, unearned entitlement. She wanted to be a high-fashion mogul, and my parents treated her shallow ambitions like a sacred religion. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, introverted numbers girl. I preferred spreadsheets to social climbing. Because I wore practical clothes, drove a used sedan, and didn't care about designer labels or country club gossip, my parents treated me like a disappointing roommate who had accidentally wandered into their pristine, highly curated lives. They didn't just ignore me, they actively resented my lack of superficial ambition. The only person in our entire bloodline who truly saw me for who I was and actually valued my mind was my grandfather, Arthur. My grandfather was a retired machinist. He didn't care about high society. He cared about integrity, hard work, and quiet stability. When he passed away from heart failure when I was 25, the reading of his will sent a seismic shockwave through my family. My parents had been banking on his death to bail them out of their mounting credit card debts. They assumed he would leave his assets to his only son. Instead, the executor read a document that made my mother gasp out loud. My grandfather left his fully paid-off, beautiful 3-bedroom house in the quiet suburbs entirely to me. He left my parents and Chloe absolutely nothing. I will never forget the words he included in the addendum of his will. The lawyer read them aloud in a flat, clinical voice. "Clara knows the value of hard work and the importance of a solid foundation. The rest of you only know the value of a price tag. I am leaving this home to the only person in this family who will not sell it to buy an illusion." My parents were livid. The car ride home was a suffocating nightmare of screaming accusations. Chloe threw a temper tantrum that lasted for weeks, sobbing about how unfair it was that the boring sister got a house while she was trying to launch a fashion brand from a rented apartment. They demanded I sell the property and split the equity for the good of the family. For the first time in my life, I stood my ground. I told them no, the house was legally mine. It was my sanctuary. I moved in, painted the walls, planted a garden, and for 3 blissful years, I finally felt completely safe. I was working as a junior financial risk analyst, paying my own bills, and keeping my toxic family at a strict, polite distance. But safety, especially when you share DNA with narcissists, is just a fragile illusion waiting to be shattered. The shattering happened on a Tuesday night in late November. It was raining heavily, the streets slick with oil and water. I was driving home from a late shift at my firm, listening to a podcast, thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. As I entered the intersection 4 blocks from my sanctuary, a drunk driver in a massive pickup truck ran a red light at 60 miles an hour. I never even saw the headlights. I just remember a deafening, terrifying crunch of metal, the violent shattering of safety glass, and the feeling of my body being thrown like a rag doll. And then there was only a deep, suffocating, absolute blackness. The physical trauma to my body was catastrophic. I suffered 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a shattered femur, and severe cranial swelling. When the paramedics pulled me from the mangled wreckage of my car, I was unresponsive. The doctors at the trauma center had no choice. To save my brain from permanent, irreversible damage due to the swelling, they placed me in a deep, medically induced coma. I was asleep for exactly 4 weeks. When you wake up from a coma, you don't wake up peacefully like a character in a movie. You don't flutter your eyelashes and smile at the sunlight. You wake up choking. You wake up in a terrifying, disorienting panic, your throat blocked by the rigid plastic of a breathing tube, your wrists restrained to the bed rails so you don't rip the IV lines out of your own veins. I remember the harsh, blinding fluorescent lights burning my eyes as a nurse gently, firmly spoke to me, telling me to cough as she pulled the agonizing tube from my trachea. My chest burned. Every single bone in my body felt like it had been put through a grinder. I looked around the sterile, beeping hospital room, my vision blurry. I expected to see my family. Despite our differences, despite the jealousy over the house, I expected to see my mother sitting in the vinyl chair, holding my hand. I expected to see my father looking relieved that his youngest daughter had survived a fatal crash. The room was completely, utterly empty. Where is my family? I rasped, my voice sounding like crushed glass tearing through my throat. I looked frantically at the nurse, panic spiking my heart monitor. Were they in an accident too? The nurse stopped adjusting my IV drip. She looked down at me, and I saw something in her eyes that chilled me far more than the physical pain. It was deep, profound, uncomfortable pity. She hesitated, biting her lip. They haven't been here, sweetheart, the nurse said softly, avoiding my gaze. Not for about 3 weeks. Your father came in on day 4, spoke to the billing department, and left instructions for us to call his office when you woke up. 3 weeks. I had been fighting for my life, a machine breathing for me, and my family hadn't even bothered to sit by my bed. They had treated my near-death experience as an administrative inconvenience. It took 2 more days for my father, Richard, to finally walk into my hospital room. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't rush to my bedside. He didn't even try to fake a hug. He stood at the foot of my hospital bed, wearing an expensive golf shirt, shifting his weight nervously and checking his Rolex. "Dad," I whispered, tears of relief and confusion finally falling down my cheeks. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die. "I'm glad you're awake, Clara," he said. His voice was entirely flat, completely devoid of any paternal warmth or relief. He cleared his throat loudly. "Listen, we don't have a lot of time. We need to talk about some administrative changes that happened while you were incapacitated." The coldness in his tone, the complete lack of emotion, made the bottom drop out of my stomach. "What changes?" I asked, gripping the thin hospital blanket. Richard didn't look me in the eye. He stared at the heart monitor above my head. Chloe had a massive, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to launch her fashion brand globally. She found an incredible investor, but she needed a significant amount of matching capital. Fast. "And your medical bills, Clara? They were piling up. We didn't know if you were going to wake up at all, or if you were going to wake up as a vegetable needing permanent, expensive care." He paused, taking a slow breath, preparing to deliver the killing blow with the casual indifference of a man swiping a credit card. "We enacted an emergency, medical power of attorney," Richard stated, his voice hardening. We sold your grandfather's house, Clara. It's gone. We had to. We used the equity to pay off some of the initial hospital debts to keep you on the machines. And the rest went to fund Chloe's business and secure a new estate in Beverly Hills for her brand launch. We needed a property that reflected the brand's luxury status. It was a difficult decision, but it was for the greater good of the family. I stared at him. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my bed suddenly spiked into a frantic, terrifyingly fast rhythm. The room seemed to spin. You sold my house? I choked out, the betrayal suffocating me faster than the crushed lung. I struggled to sit up, ignoring the agonizing pain in my broken ribs. You forged a power of attorney while I was in a coma to buy a mansion for Chloe? Don't use the word forged, Clara. It was a medical emergency, Richard snapped, his face instantly twisting into a cruel, defensive scowl. He stepped closer, pointing a finger at me. You were dying. You would have lost the house to the hospital debt collectors anyway once the insurance capped out. We salvaged the capital. We protected the family's assets. You're young. You'll recover. You can just rent an apartment when you get out. He didn't apologize. He didn't care that I was physically broken, emotionally traumatized, and currently hooked up to life-saving machines. He turned around, adjusted his collar, and walked out of the hospital room without looking back. He left me completely alone, homeless, and financially devastated. Let me pause right here and break the fourth wall for a second. Have you ever experienced a betrayal so profound, so violently cruel, that it actually altered the chemistry of your brain? Imagine waking up from the brink of death, your body shattered, only to realize the people who were supposed to protect you used your coma as an opportunity to legally steal everything you owned. What would you do in that hospital bed? Would you cry? Would you call the police? Would you scream for a lawyer? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one, because what I did next wasn't born out of sadness. The moment my father walked out of that room, my grief instantly evaporated. It was burned away, replaced by a cold, primal, terrifyingly focused rage. I didn't call the police. I was a junior financial risk analyst. Even in my drugged, traumatized state, I understood the terrifying reality of the legal system. Fighting a fraudulently obtained power of attorney and a finalized real estate sale in civil court would take years. It would require hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that I didn't have. My parents knew this. They banked on my poverty, my physical weakness, and my exhaustion keeping me silent. They assumed I would just accept the loss, rent a cheap apartment, and fade away. They thought they had buried me. They didn't realize they had just planted a seed. When I was finally discharged from the hospital 3 weeks later, I had a severe limp, a bag of cheap clothes, and exactly $600 in a checking account my parents hadn't managed to drain. I rented a tiny, miserable, windowless motel room on the gritty outskirts of Los Angeles. I slept on a mattress that smelled of stale smoke and bleach, eating instant ramen, while my sister posted glamorous, filtered Instagram photos from her new $5 million Beverly Hills mansion, a mansion funded entirely by the theft of my sanctuary. I went back to my job as a financial risk analyst. But I didn't just work. I became a machine. I worked 80-hour weeks. I barely slept. I funneled all my pain, all my rage, and all my trauma into studying. I studied every legal loophole, every complex corporate debt structure, and every predatory lending tactic on Wall Street. I learned how fortunes were built, and more importantly, I learned how they were legally, ruthlessly destroyed. During this dark, grueling period of my life, I met a man who would hand me the keys to my revenge. His name was Marcus Vance. Marcus was the CEO of Apex Capital, a terrifying multi-billion-dollar private equity firm known for executing brutal, hostile takeovers. My mid-tier firm was assigned to audit a massive, highly complex portfolio of distressed assets that Marcus's firm was about to acquire for $500 million. During my audit, I found something. It was a deeply hidden, incredibly toxic liability, a catastrophic debt bomb buried under layers of shell companies that his entire team of Ivy League analysts had completely missed. I didn't tell my boss. I didn't write an email. I printed the file, walked directly out of my building, marched into the towering glass skyscraper of Apex Capital, bypassed Marcus's furious secretary, and dropped the file directly onto his massive mahogany desk. If you finalize the purchase of this portfolio tomorrow morning, you will personally lose $40 million in 6 months, I told him plainly, refusing to break eye contact. Marcus, a silver-haired shark of a man who looked like he chewed glass for breakfast, didn't yell. He looked at the file, then looked at me. He called in his lead analyst. They verified my findings within 45 minutes. I had just saved his firm from a catastrophic, humiliating financial disaster. He called me back into his office, alone. He poured 2 glasses of scotch. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, studying my cheap, ill-fitting suit and the lingering, painful limp from my accident. "I'm someone who needs to learn how to completely destroy a company using its own debt," I said, my voice as cold as ice. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. He didn't ask for details. He didn't ask for a resume. He just smiled. A slow, terrifying, deeply approving smile. "You work directly for me now, Clara," he said, handing me a glass. For the next 3 years, Marcus became my mentor in the dark arts of high finance. He taught me how to weaponize capital. He taught me about mezzanine loans, distressed asset acquisition, and how to legally corner an opponent until they begged for bankruptcy. My salary tripled. Then it quadrupled. I moved out of the motel into a beautiful, secure apartment, but I maintained my absolute total invisibility. To my family, I was still the broken, poor, estranged sister they had discarded. While I was building an arsenal, I watched Chloe's fashion brand carefully from the shadows. Just as I suspected, she was a terrible businesswoman. Behind the glamorous Instagram posts, the celebrity endorsements, and the lavish Beverly Hills mansion parties, the company was hemorrhaging cash at an astonishing rate. She was spending millions on marketing and parties, but her product line was failing. My parents were pouring everything they had, maxing out their own credit to keep her afloat and maintain the illusion of success. When traditional banks looked at their horrific financials and refused to lend them any more money, my father did something incredibly desperate and incredibly stupid. He stepped out of the regulated banking sector and into the shadows. My father took out a highly toxic, astronomical commercial loan from a predatory shadow lender to secure the massive influx of cash needed to keep Chloe's failing brand alive for 1 more quarter. He used the Beverly Hills mansion as collateral. It was a specific type of predatory lending called a balloon loan with an acceleration clause. This meant that the interest rates were exorbitant, and if they missed a single solitary payment, the lender had the legal right to immediately accelerate the loan. They could demand the entire principal balance in full immediately. If it wasn't paid, the lender could seize the property and all associated assets within 24 hours, completely bypassing the standard lengthy court foreclosure process. It was financial suicide. My father signed the paperwork anyway, blinded by the desperation to maintain his golden child's image. I was sitting in my glass-walled executive office at Apex Capital, sipping a black coffee, when the automated alert popped up on my Bloomberg terminal. My father's toxic loan had just defaulted. He missed a payment. The shadow lender, realizing they were dealing with a sinking ship, immediately packaged the defaulted loan into a portfolio of distressed debt, trying to sell it off to aggressive collection agencies for pennies on the dollar before the property lost more value. My heart hammered against my ribs. The trap was set. The prey was bleeding. It was time to pull the trigger. I stood up, walked out of my office, and went straight to Marcus. He was reviewing a merger document, but he looked up when he saw my face. "I need to make a personal acquisition," I told him, my voice tight with adrenaline. "I want to buy a specific piece of distressed high-risk debt, and I'm using my entire accumulated 3-year bonus to do it." Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. He pulled up the file on his own terminal. He saw the names on the defaulted loan: Richard Sterling, Evelyn Sterling, and Chloe Sterling. He looked at me, recognizing the absolute lethal determination burning in my eyes. He had taught me how to hold the knife. Now, he was watching me unsheath it. "Buy it through an anonymous shell company. Marcus advised quietly, his voice a low, approving rumble. Layer it behind 3 different LLCs. Don't let them see the blade until it's already in their chest. I executed the purchase exactly 3 days before Chloe's highly publicized, massively expensive brand relaunch and housewarming gala. I spent $2.5 million in cash, my entire accumulated wealth, to buy the exclusive, total rights to my family's debt. I wasn't just their creditor anymore. I was their executioner. Let's break the 4th wall again. They say time heals all wounds. But I learned sitting in that executive office that time is just the incubator for the perfect revenge. Would you have had the patience to wait 3 excruciating years, grinding in the shadows, watching the people who stole your home live in luxury, just to ensure they lost absolutely everything? Or would the urge to confront them earlier, to scream at them for what they did, have ruined the trap? Tell me your verdict in the comments, because the patience it took to wait for the night of the gala, to let them buy the champagne and invite the guests, was the hardest thing I have ever done. But the payoff was an absolute masterpiece. Which brings us right back to the grand foyer of the $5 million Beverly Hills mansion. The air smelled of expensive lilies and catered truffle hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner of the massive, marble-floored room. Chloe was standing by the sweeping grand staircase, wearing a custom silk dress, throwing her head back and laughing with tech CEOs and fashion editors. She looked like a queen holding court. And then I walked through the massive double doors. I wasn't wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit anymore. I wasn't limping. I was wearing a sleek, tailored, blood-red Tom Ford blazer over a crisp black blouse. I looked exactly like the corporate apex predator Marcus had trained me to be. The music didn't stop, but the energy in the room shifted instantly. My father, Richard, saw me first. He was standing near the champagne fountain, chatting with a prominent local investor, the color violently, instantly drained from his face. He excused himself, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of shock and sheer panic. He marched over, grabbing my arm, hissing like a cornered snake. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice a furious whisper. "How did you get past the gate? Security is going to throw you out right now." I calmly reached into my designer bag. I pulled out the thick, federal stamped folder. I handed it to him, ensuring the prominent investors nearby could clearly see the transaction. "Security works for me now, Dad," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the soft music. "Because as of 9 a.m. this morning, I don't just own the mortgage to this house. I own the bank that holds it. You are in default. The acceleration clause has been triggered. You have 24 hours to pack your bags." Richard froze. His hand trembled as he looked down at the folder. He opened it, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. He saw the name of the holding company. He saw the notice of immediate seizure and default. What is this?" he stammered, his voice cracking. The arrogant, wealthy patriarch persona completely shattered in an instant, replaced by a terrified, confused old man. "This is a mistake. I was negotiating with the lender. They said I had until Monday." "The lender sold your debt, Richard," I said clinically. "And I bought it." Chloe had noticed the commotion. She rushed over, her perfect, camera-ready smile slipping into an ugly scowl. "Dad, what is she doing here? Clara, get out! You look pathetic! You're ruining my launch!" "There is no launch, Chloe," I said, turning my cold, unwavering gaze to my sister. "Your company is bankrupt. Dad took out a toxic loan against this house to save your failing, pathetic brand. You missed 3 payments. You defaulted." I took a step closer, towering over her both physically and psychologically. "And I bought the debt," I whispered, the venom of 3 years finally seeping into my words, "with the money I made while you were playing dress-up with my stolen inheritance." My mother, Evelyn, had joined the circle. She looked over Richard's shoulder at the documents. She let out a horrific, high-pitched gasp, clapping a hand over her mouth. "Clara, you bought the debt? You can't do this. We're your family. This is our home." You ceased being my family the moment you signed my name on a forged document while I was choking on a ventilator, I replied, my voice devoid of a single ounce of mercy. And this isn't your home, it's a stolen asset, and I'm repossessing it. The guests around us had stopped talking entirely. The elite crowd, the fashion editors, and the investors realized they weren't watching a family reunion. They were witnessing a brutal, legal corporate execution. Clara, please, Richard begged, actual tears pooling in his eyes. His knees buckled slightly, the sheer weight of his immediate, inescapable financial ruin crushing him. He reached out to touch my arm. We have nowhere to go. If you seize the house, Chloe loses the collateral for the business. We lose everything. We'll be on the street. I'll pay you back. I swear to God, just give me time. I'll get another loan. You had 3 years, Dad, I said, stepping back so he couldn't touch me. You have 24 hours to vacate my property. If you take any fixtures, appliances, or assets belonging to the estate, I will have you arrested for theft. The sheriff will be here tomorrow at 9 a.m. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need to hear their pathetic, weeping apologies. I turned around, the heels of my designer shoes clicking against the marble floor, and walked out of the mansion, leaving them to face the silent, judging stares of the 200 people they had invited to witness their ruin. The fallout was swift, brutal, and incredibly public. The next morning, precisely at 9 a.m., 2 sheriff's deputies escorted my screaming, crying mother and my silent, broken father off the property. Chloe tried to throw a massive fit, demanding to take her designer furniture and her racks of inventory, but my lawyers were present with the seizure documents to ensure she left with nothing but the clothes on her back. The local business press caught wind of the eviction. The headline, "Fake Fashion Heiress Evicted by Sister in Hostile Debt Takeover," went viral in Los Angeles. Chloe's brand was instantly, permanently toxic. The investors who had attended her party, furious at the deception and the financial instability, withdrew their funding immediately and threatened to sue her for misrepresentation. Because of the massive, unpayable debt they still owed to my shell company after the house seizure, due to the exorbitant interest rates and penalty fees of the toxic loan they signed, my parents were forced into total, devastating personal bankruptcy. Their credit was utterly destroyed. They moved into a cramped, miserable, roach-infested 2-bedroom apartment in a bad part of the city. My father, the man who wanted to be part of the 1%, had to take a job as a shift manager at a retail store just to pay for groceries. I didn't keep the mansion. It was stained with their greed and my trauma. I sold it to a foreign investor for $6 million, taking a massive profit. I donated the original value of my grandfather's stolen house to a charity that supports victims of medical and financial abuse. I am currently a junior partner at Apex Capital. I own a beautiful, highly secure penthouse in Seattle, completely insulated from the toxic ghosts of my past. Looking back at the nightmare of waking up in that empty hospital room, the most profound lesson I learned wasn't about high finance, real estate law, or debt acquisition. It was a terrifying, crucial lesson about the nature of betrayal. When you are the scapegoat in a toxic family, they rely entirely on your empathy. They rely on your belief that blood is thicker than water. They use your love and your desperate desire for a family as a weapon against you. My parents looked at a woman who had just survived a horrific car crash and saw nothing but a vulnerable target and an opportunity to liquidate an asset. But here is what narcissists never understand. When you strip a person of everything they have, when you push them into the abyss and leave them for dead, you remove their fear. A person with nothing to lose and everything to learn is the most dangerous entity on earth. When you realize the people around you are parasites, do not confront them while you are weak. Do not scream or cry or demand justice from people who lack a conscience. They will only use your emotions to paint you as crazy. Smile. Disappear into the shadows. Let them think their manipulation worked perfectly. Let them buy the mansion. Let them host the party. And in the silence, build your mind. Educate yourself. Learn the rules of the game they think they are playing. Protect yourself with absolute, ruthless precision. And then, when the time is right, hand them the eviction notice, step back, and let their own greed be the executioner. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, if it validated your own experiences with toxic families or financial abuse, or if you simply appreciate the cold, precise beauty of corporate karma, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Protect your heart, protect your assets, and never let them see you coming. I will see you in the next story.